Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Kaya. Today I'm going to be talking about The Poisonous Path by the black metal band Behexen. I'm really excited to share this video with you today. I absolutely love this album. I have it on vinyl, as you can see. You're going to get to see my vinyl in depth today, the vinyl color, the booklet, everything, as well as I'm going to share some information that I kind of researched and discovered about Behexen. I have never heard anything prior to this album of Behexen's, but this is a part of my ABCs of Vinyl series. This is the second installment, so obviously letter B. If you haven't checked out my first installment, A for Amorphous, I have a deep dive on the Carolean Isthmus vinyl that I bought from Amorphous. That's their debut. I also have like an album review of that. So definitely go check that out if you're interested. I am doing a whole series on ABCs of vinyl. So this is, like I said, the second installment. So without further ado, let's get into The Poisonous Path by Behexen. The Poisonous Path is the fifth album by black metal band Behexen and was released May 27th, 2016 by Demomir Morty Productions. It was released on 2 limited edition vinyls, a digipack, and digitally on Bandcamp, with a few non-limited edition vinyl represses. Behexen's lineup consists of Horns on drums, Hoth Torog on vocals and lyrics, Shatrog on guitars, Wrath also on guitars, and then a guest guitar musician who did a few solos on this record named Garganta. Behexen is a black metal band from Finland with songwriting themes ranging from occultism, ritualism, and Satanism. Their discography dates back to a couple demos that were released in the late 1990s with positive reviews. It wasn't until July of the year 2000 that Behexen would release their first full-length album titled Ritual Satanum. The Poisonous Path was recorded in November of 2015 at Phantom Studios in Ulevari, Finland, and was mixed and mastered at Necromorbis Studio in Sweden. Phantom Studio was also the place where Insomnium recorded their album One for Sorrow and their EP Argent Moon. Christina Leto, who did artwork for The Poisonous Path, has also been the band's bass player since 2013, according to Metal Archives. Although Christina is not directly listed as their bass player for this particular record, I would assume she did do the bass for this album as well as the artwork and photography, considering The Poisonous Path was recorded after she joined as a bass player, and she's been in charge of photography for previous Behexen projects, including their 2008 record My Soul for His Glory and their 2012 project Nightside Emanations. I also want to point out that I thought it was curious that nowhere in my research was there ever a bass player mentioned and credited for this album. Not on Discogs, not on Metal Archives. I'm assuming the record has bass, so this is completely an assumption that Christina did do the bass. But like I said, she joined this band in 2013. This album came out 3 years later, so I'm assuming that she did it, but nobody is directly listed as the bass player. So if you know for sure, please let me know down below in the comments. Christina Leto has also done artwork for bands such as Horna and their 2015 project Hangin to Let, as well as photography for bands such as Dark Sarah, Bythos, and Sargeist. The Poisonous Path is Behexen's 5th full-length album and features 10 songs with a runtime of 55 minutes and 59 seconds. The limited edition digipack is 6 panels with a glued-in 19-page booklet. The special edition vinyls were limited to just 115 hand-numbered copies that included an exclusive silkscreen hand-printed faux leather slipcase, black vinyls with a screen-printed sigil on the second vinyl side D, an A4 cardboard poster, a download card, and a 12-inch by 12-inch 20-page booklet that was glued into the gatefold. The vinyls I purchased were transparent red heavy vinyls with black splatter, and they are gorgeous. Side D is empty and features a laser engraved sigil etched into it. An observation I began to realize when digging deeper into the members of Beheksen is that the black metal community in Finland is quite small, with a lot of people interacting and being in bands together. For example, Shatrog, who is a black metal guitarist in Beheksen, was a member and also did guitar and bass work for Sargeist, Horna, and many others. He was also a live musician for the band Nightbringer for some time. Bythos is another black metal band located in Finland and is a side project for some of the members of Beheksen. Beheksen's main vocalist, Hoth Torog, goes by MS in Bythos and performs as one of their vocalists. It seems that Bythos was the most recent project for some of the members in Beheksen, as they released an album in 2020 called The Womb of Zero, which is ironic considering Bythos was formed in 2015, 1 year prior to The Poisonous Path being released, yet that is Beheksen's last and latest released album. There was also a lot of concern, at least on the internet, about white nationalist musicians coming from Finland, and this in turn means that there are people who believe that members of Beheksen are believers of this ideology. Whether or not this is just speculation, one thing that is proven specifically for the lead vocalist is that he is a Satanist himself and practices black magic. And although this concern for some band members and bands being white nationalist is warranted for some, I was curious as to why and how this came to be without diving too off topic from Beheksen. I discovered a user on Reddit, now it is Reddit, so take it with a grain of salt, who offered a better explanation as to why musicians who would be or are considered to be white nationalists playing together in many different projects within his country of Finland. His statement goes as follows. When you study Finnish bands, you have to realize two things. A, our nationalism isn't very right-wing. It's almost universal. But because of right-wing adoption, even us lefties have had to stop using typical nationalistic symbols. B, Finland is a small country with hundreds of different clans and tribes, which means to this day that scenes are very segregated, mainly due to geographical location. So you really can't pick and choose who you play with. That said, the problem in finding bands that are aligned politically or avoiding bands that have connections to certain people is difficult because Finns are pretty reserved when it comes to sharing their political beliefs, and metal bands in particular don't really appear as political either way. So you have to do some actual research or talk to the guys to figure out their political beliefs. He concluded his thought by saying, we're still very much forest people, kind of secluded into our own world, so I do recommend visiting Finland, preferably for a bigger festival like Numi Rock. To sum up, I realized that Finland is such a small country, it's no wonder that they would have an even smaller pool of musicians to pick from. It seems like the black metal scene, and maybe just the metal scene in general, is a tight-knit community where everybody knows everyone and have played in or swapped bands many times. I compare it to how the big four metal bands came to be in California, with many bands like Megadeth, Slayer, and Metallica all at one point either playing together, if not recording together. Bands such as Horna and Sargeist being associated with white nationalists would of course translate to Beheksen having white nationalist musicians, considering they all share band members. Whether this bothers you on a personal level or doesn't affect you at all, I found it interesting for the sake of the geographical history of Finland and the history of Finnish black metal as a whole. I know white nationalism is something that is tied to many bands and musicians in the black metal scene. I don't find it odd that white nationalistic ideology would exist in Finland still today, because historically Finland allied itself with Nazi Germany during the Second World War, which was not to prevent Soviet conquest, but to win back territories lost to the Soviet Union as a result of the Winter War of 1939-1940. The peace treaty that ended the war in March 1940 left Finnish independence intact. In terms of where this record is in their discography, Beheksen is known for a slight switch in terms of overall tone and production from their first two albums to their most current. It's known that their first two albums feature higher-pitched vocals, a more raw production and recording quality, and guitar riffs for days. The Poisonous Path is comparable to their fourth record, Nightside Emanations, which both feature a more drony, emotional side to their music, similar in tone to bands such as Insomnium, in my opinion. It is also speculated that the change in their later sound happened because of several early band members leaving, such as Lunatic and Veilroth. Shatrog, who again also plays in Horna, also has parted ways with the band, even though he is featured on this album. I'm assuming he just parted ways after this album was released. This is what Horns, Beheksen's drummer, had to say about this change in their sound with their later records. I think at some point we drifted away from the angsty and hate-fueled primitive expression and moved towards the more personal and occult-based approach as we matured as people and as we gained a wider spiritual spectrum of our surroundings and of the universe by our own personal studies, rituals, and magical workings and perceptions. And let's not forget that when My Soul for His Glory was eventually recorded, the main members' age started with 3 instead of a 2. So we obviously were matured biologically as well. There is also a transition now where most of the songs on the Poisonous Path and in their previous record, Nightside Emanations, feature lyrics that are in English. And instead of straight satanic or anti-Christian lyrical themes, the band is writing what is called left-hand path satanic lyrics, which means lyrical content that is focused more on black magic. These songs also feature cleaner production and more of a black death metal sound, and they are rumored to have begun playing this sound over the more raw black metal sound they debuted with. Hoth stated vaguely that everything influences his lyrics and music. He said in an interview, "Everything esoteric and exoteric that surrounds us can inspire us. Books, religions, magic, death, music, all the things that we hear, see, and experience can feed our inspiration. I get influences from my own life and experiences amongst the occult. Black magic is a comprehensive part of my life, so it's natural that my inspiration comes from there." Beheksen is a German word for to bewitch or bedevil, and when asked why they chose this name for the band, Horns said, "We chose that name when we came to the conclusion that most good English names were already used. So then we agreed to use a German name instead, and that specific name appealed to us." Horns is asked about the Poisonous Path and is asked what his feelings are on the album and how much of this maturation of sound is reflected not only in the album but also within himself. He said, "With the Poisonous Path, we have come quite far from the violent anti-Christianity of Ritual Satanum. Compositions are much better and more varied overall, and I'm very satisfied of the outcome. Musically, I tried to evoke the darkest atmosphere from all the previous albums, and the darkness there is really tangible, and lyrics make link to the real practical magic as well, namely the Poison Path, the title track. And they represent spiritual sorceress journey towards the illumination of our gods and of the other side." And the last composition of the album, Rakadesta Satanen, which translates roughly as "for the love of Satan," is kind of the culmination point of the existence of Behexen, and we shall see if we can ever go past that point. Now let's dive into the actual music on this album, because ultimately that is the most important part of this review. Track 1 is the title track of the album, called The Poisonous Path, and it features an ambient intro that was well balanced in my speakers. And the drums are nice and forward in the mix. There's one thing about this album, which is there is no classic black metal woodshed production that I'm very used to hearing in a lot of the previous black metal records that I've listened to. You know what I'm talking about. Everything is balanced very well. It's very clean and well produced, but not overly produced to the point that it's too clean and too mainstream in sound, at least in my opinion. I know that there's some reviews of people who prefer the older, more raw black metal sound in their debut versus what they're releasing now with this record and their previous one. But that's why I mentioned the change in their sound, because for me, I enjoyed the sound of this record, but I just wanted to clarify that. This track features a lot of my favorite things: a spoken word section in the bridge, a distorted guitar solo in the outro, and a very satisfying breakdown in the final verse with the lyrics, "This is a poisonous path," layered over it. The track ends with an exhale before immediately filling the space with more ambient noise, which slowly fades up into track 2, "Wand of Shadows." Now, this ambient noise that's transitioning between the tracks is something you're going to hear me mention a lot in this review, so just kind of keep that in mind. Wand of Shadows, track 2, features what sounds like a priest or a man in an opera mourning in pain in the halls of some castle or like a crypt. I love the gargantuan drums at the end of this song too, especially with the ending lyrics, "to destroy the kingdom of God." Track 3, Cave of the Dark Dreams, again has ambient noise while transitioning tracks. Starts off with the band doing the classic black metal blast beats, and then it opens up to this almost thrash metal sounding instrumental. The way they do this makes this instrumental feel very open in comparison to the blast beat section that they introduced the track with, which is a great use of adding diversity in the track. And again, the drums sound very full and layered with reverb in the mix. Everything is very nicely balanced in this track. And the vocals have really great reverb on them as well. And I love the way this track ends with this grunty exhale and even more cavey, creepy ambient noise as we go into track 4, which is called Sword of Promethean Fire, which is a banger. And it opens up. It opens up in a way that is similar in sound to a Cannibal Corpse song, which I know is kind of weird. The only thing that is different is the massive amount of reverb on the vocals. There's this kind of muddy, phased out guitar that's featured in this track with hints of double bass at every like 8 measures or so, and it's very groovy. This song is much different in terms of pacing than the previous 3 tracks. I can already tell live live that this song would be really, really awesome and groovy, and just, it's a banger. And I think that this is probably my favorite track off the record. And like I said, this track reminded me of like a Cannibal Corpse song. This is a song that is definitely more death metal in its roots than anything else. The track ends with a fuzzy guitar riff before going into this amazing breakdown at the end with the lyrics, "Rise, rise, rise." This song definitely would have a pit if you were going to see it live. And I love the held out lyric, "Lucifer," with a massive amount of reverb on it at the end. It's big, it's gargantuan. It fills me with joy. In my opinion, this is how you do modern day black metal with clean production. Black metal can have good production, mixing, and mastering. It doesn't always have to have this like woodshed, no mixing or leveling of any kind, and it's good type production. Like, you can still make a very clean sounding black metal record and have it be good. Now, I did listen to this album on vinyl, as you see behind me, so there was obviously silence within transitioning from track 4 to track 5, Umbra Luceri, because I had to flip the vinyl. But if you were listening to this record straight through, either digitally or on CD, there is still creepy ambient room noise filling the transition between these two tracks. But I just wanted to briefly mention that. After this brief ambient transition, it goes right into another blast beat black metal beginning. The highlights for me on this track were definitely the lyrics. I love the second verse where a higher guitar riff is introduced to layer over the lyrics, "In the shadow, which is the opposite of life, the holy light of the other side." There's also chant vocals at the end to sing the lyrics "Umbra Luciferi," which sounds like a cult singing in a cave. I know that's weird, but that's like the visual that I got. And y'all know I'm a visual listener. So I think it also has something to do with the album cover, which looks like a cultist leader in a cave. So there you go. This song ends with these large tribal drums before going into even more ambient noise as we transition into track 6, called "Luminous Darkness." Now, this song starts out kind of like a grindcore song. I know that's weird, but I get elements of Dying Fetus with the blech vocals at the beginning and the way the bass and the main deep guitar rhythm section sounds. And I love the random ambient vocals at the end of this track. Then we go into "Chalice of Abyssal Water," which is track 7. This song reminds me of Insomnium in terms of tone. The vocal sounds are off the charts. In terms of reverb, it really makes it sound like a cavern of men singing. There's this nice breakdown and slower section towards the end. This is a very moody track, and I love the instrumental outro. The riff is so beautiful, yet so painful at the same time. It really carries a lot of weight to it. Now we flip over to the second vinyl, which again starts us off with ambient noise before we get into track 8, "Pentagram of the Black Earth." This song has super open breakdown with a wonderful chord change that really reminds me of what you would get with Death. There's also a great outro with the vocals having this echo that is like a yelling, it's like a yell, singing yell that's layered underneath it. And they do it in a way that sounds almost deranged. It's like a war cry echo. So it's like lyric and then this like war cry echo, another lyric, war cry echo. It's very trippy. The first vocal delivers the lyrics in a way that's more dignified, like a king, whereas the echo is like a soldier at war. And there's a very slow rhythm section that ends the song after this. We continue with more ambient noise, this time with some faint, almost what sounds like bird noises, like a seagull. It almost feels as if these ambient noises are escalating in some way, whether that be emotionally or physically in some way. For example, the first set of ambient noises on Vinyl 1 side A were very underground, cave-esque in a way, and now with this second vinyl, it sounds as if we are kind of out in the open, like by an ocean or something like that. Track 9, Gallows of Inversion, continue with these black metal blast beats. There's a lot of layered guttural vocals through this song, as well as the blast beats continuing. There's even more layered vocals in the middle of the song that sound like people at war. Then it goes into these choral vocals that are very haunting, very medieval in tone, but the guitar riff stays memorable and one of the main things you take away from this track, along with an essence of pain and suffering. The track ends with a nice, good, crazy scream at the end with no empty space as more creepy ambient noise fills the transition between this song and the next one, but this time the ambient noise escalates to what honestly sounds like the aftermath of a battle of ships at sea where there were no survivors. I don't know how else to describe it. It really sounded like that, honestly. And I've never really had to describe what I was listening to like that, but that's what I envisioned. So then we go into track 10, Rhapsodista Satanin. I'm probably butchering that, but this is the last song on the record and is one of my favorite tracks. The guitar riff is extremely memorable. The overall tone of this song is one of hope and inspiration. Like, even though we as listeners experienced so much death and misery and turmoil in the previous tracks, it's going to be okay and we should feel hopeful. That's what that song makes you feel. And of course there's group vocals that sound like a soft choir in this, and beautiful guitar riffs that exude so much pain and remorse. There's also a great instrumental outro at the end of this that fades very softly, but honestly, it's the silence after this track ends, after the album ends, that is the most deafening sound I have ever heard after an album ends. It's something I really took away from this album. I don't have these types of listening experiences often with albums these days, but that was so memorable to me because those ambient transitions between the tracks were so frequent and filled so much space throughout the album that it's like the entire record was just one complete song, one performance. So when it ends, it ends. It's very minute for the listener. In the best way, this album made me feel very empty. You know, it's like similar to after you've spent a week or the weekend like binge watching a show and then it's done, you've watched the final episode and you're like, well, what do I do now? What do I watch? Like, do I rewatch the show? Do I just guess I'll just sit here and just think about all the crazy things that happened, you know. Now I'm going to show you the vinyl that I purchased in a little bit more detail, because honestly, this is one of the most beautiful vinyls that I have ever seen in my time collecting metal vinyls. Obviously, you see here the cover, which features a hooded figure or cult member, I guess you could say, on the cover in a cave-like scenery with the Behexen logo and the Poisonous Path below it. This is very like creepy, satanic-y, cult-esque. It's very medieval cult, in my opinion. You then open it up to see Behexen on the left with some notes about, you know, different things about the record, the artwork, the symbols were done by Hoth Torog and Christina Leto, the members of the band, and then of course P.E. Packin, who helped with interludes and things like that. And then on the right, you do see the photos that start the actual booklet. So this is the 12-inch by 12-inch booklet. On the right, you see a hand holding some jewels over this kind of smoking ritual cup, which is very pretty. And then within this gatefold, you have all of the lyrics for each track, which is just, this is gorgeous. The photos, black and white photography to feature each song. So we obviously start out with the title track, The Poisonous Path, with these kind of stones in a row. And I love this like white like fake wood texture behind everything. Then you have one of the band members on the left. You can really just see the symbolism on his forehead. You got Wand of Shadows, again, more kind of cult-like imagery. I love that the lyrics are in a nice big font so you can read it. And as we continue, we just see more pictures of the band and more cult-like imagery. And these are heavy pages. It's just beautiful. This is like if this wasn't in a gatefold and this was just a book that you could purchase by itself, this would be something you would purchase for like your coffee table. It's one of those coffee table books, you know, just when you've got guests, you know. I always remember that when I would go like as a kid to anywhere my mom took me that was like a friend's house or whatever, I just sit there bored out of my mind as a kid, just like flipping through their coffee table books. I don't know if anybody else has memories like that, but they were always very random books that nobody ever read. So, but the photography in this book is absolutely stellar. Christina did an amazing job of capturing such an intense vibe, and I love the symbol above Umbra Luciferi. It's very, very cool, and I'm pretty sure that this track, yeah, so the symbol kind of reflects the transition of the vinyl, you know, where you're flipping over to side B, vinyl 1. They've got the symbol to match that. So we just continue, you know, again, more symbols, more beautiful typography, these amazing photos. Like, I can't even imagine how expensive it was to like print these photos out and get this whole thing done. Like, it's very, very, very well thought out, well executed. It's a beautiful vinyl. And I love the symbols. And, you know, the final track, you just have an all black page that's actually like glued to the back of the vinyl gatefold for the Requiem d'Esta Satanan. And it's almost like a Pledge of Allegiance, like hand placement, you know, at least for the US. So that's the booklet. Now, I don't know how my little A4 poster got bent. I'm a little sad about that. I think I was just roughhousing the vinyls a little too hard, but this features the opening photo that you see in the booklet. So this is beautiful. I don't think that they really needed this. I'm gonna be honest, it's gorgeous, don't get me wrong. Like, the entire album is very well executed. But realistically, I don't see a lot of people like using this for anything more than just keeping it in the vinyl, you know, but maybe you do something with these. And I'm just now kind of realizing that I wish this photo was something different that wasn't in the booklet. I know that's like super nitpicky. It's gorgeous. Like, don't get me wrong. This whole thing is gorgeous. There's nothing on the back. But this could have been a different photo. But I think if I had to pick something to critique about that, that's my one thing, you know. I like, they could have just left it at the booklet and I think people would have been fine because that is gorgeous, you know. But if you're going to go into the effort of like spending money to make another beautiful poster like this, maybe pick a different photo. I don't know. Overall, I give this record a solid 9 out of 10. I think Behekson really went above and beyond with this album, not only in terms of the overall performance, but also in the presentation of this vinyl, which you got to see. I know many people think that Behekson sold out with this album and their previous record, and I can't speak about their later discography at this point in time because this record is the first Behekson album that I've ever listened to. And that I've ever purchased. But what I can say is that even though I am an enjoyer of the classic old school black metal sound, I'm also a sucker for the current clean production of modern day black metal. As I mentioned before, Insomnium is a great example of this, as well as Opeth, and I think Behekson takes inspiration from some of these bands in terms of their production, at least in their most recent records. And this is not uncommon too with their record label and just where music is kind of going. So I don't blame them for kind of going more in this route. I personally really enjoyed this album, and the experience as a listener was extremely memorable to me. As I mentioned, the ambient transitions between tracks and the overall feeling of pain and misery mixed with that of hope and enlightenment left me feeling quite satisfied at the end. It really stuck with me. It really did. So, of course, this is all just my opinion. So I highly encourage you to listen to this record on your own time if you haven't already. If you have listened to this album, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. What would you rate it? What are your thoughts on Behekson? And what's your favorite album by them? Do you prefer their older stuff? Do you prefer their newer albums? Let me know down below in the comments. I also want to know what your favorite Finnish black metal band is, and if you want me to dive more into Finnish black metal and the history of that, let me know that in the comments as well, because I'm definitely interested in kind of diving into the geography of that, if that makes sense. You know, I mentioned that I would be interested in doing a video on like Floridian death metal and why that place was so like powerful for death metal. I would be interested in doing the same for Finnish black metal. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, you guys.